If anyone says I sound like Daniel Radcliffe, though, I will kick off because I've had enough of being called Harry Potter. And the way they've chosen to do that is by punching me down and focusing on a group that's even more marginalised by them. I guess I wouldn't have known it was called this at the time because I was like 12, but I was probably what you would call a troll. And I said journalism, and he was like, "Oh, so you're training to be a professional liar?" And someone went in and shot a gun in there, thinking that they were all paedophiles. Actually, Severus Snape was getting pegged. Yeah, because essentially what it does is it divert the person's argument, which are obviously valid arguments from my point of view, and what they zoom in on is the use of a certain word, and they're like, oh, you use this word, that automatically makes all your arguments invalid. Also, JK Rowling is a TERF. I've been silently grading your questioning.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just to make sure that you have a future career in journalism.
Oh, well, what's your verdict?
I think good 9 out of 10,
good.
Maybe.
Okay, 9 out of 10. Room for improvement. I'll take that.
Yeah, no one's a perfect 10.
Yeah, exactly. No, but
other than me when we're talking about my looks. But
obviously, yeah. Hey Harry, how's it going?
Yeah, it's good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Where are you right now?
I'm in Norwich, in my bedroom.
Oh, cool.
Which is about the size of a cupboard. It's like Harry Potter's thing under his stairs.
Very adequate. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to hear you, dude. How have you been over the last couple of months?
I mean, so I'm in my final year of uni, so I was supposed to have finished in May,
wow.
And because of all the coronavirus stuff, all my deadlines got pushed back to June. So I literally only finished a few days ago.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's been stressful as fuck. I don't know if you're cutting out the swearing. I can tone that down if you want.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm completely fine with it. Let's not limit ourselves yet.
Yeah, I don't want to get demonetized on YouTube.
I'm trusting I'm not getting anything. I mean, yeah, I'm not making anything. Let's just get the most of what we can.
All right, cool.
To me, there was sort of like a weightless moment, especially after the whole lockdown happened, where like no one knew anything. But it's strangely, I don't know if this experience is shared anywhere else, but to me at least, it was kind of peaceful in a sense. Like 2 weeks before people started realizing, oh wait, what are we gonna do now with everything planned for the rest of the year?
Yeah, yeah. No, I feel that because I mean, I would have finished my course in Leeds in my student house, but I came back because just because it would have been easier here, and I don't have to pay money for food and stuff like that.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, there was that kind of like 2 week period where I was kind of like, yeah, this is actually quite chill. And then it got into the repetition, and I was like, okay, I'm literally just waking up every day in my normal house. I'm not seeing any of my friends. That kind of like novelty of lockdown wore out a bit. So I'm definitely ready to get all this over with.
Definitely, yeah. But yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely been a journey, and it's, you know, I know the memes out there, every month's a new thing, but it does feel scary. I think partly it's because of I mean, since we're online, and now since we're forced to be online, we have to look at the world as a global situation, and parts of the world are not looking good.
Yeah.
So maybe that gives you sort of pessimistic view on our global situation. But I don't know. It's sometimes it can get pretty scary just thinking about how the world is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been quite pessimistic about
Hmm.
um, the kind of world situation, and particularly with politics and the government. Um, but surprisingly, the whole coronavirus thing has shown how much people kind of unite within a crisis, and
Right.
that's been a good to kind of look at, because it's not like the whole of society is burning down. Everyone's still standing by each other and supporting each other. So
Hmm. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. But yeah, let's focus. What were you doing in uni before well, what was your course?
so I studied journalism. Um, my final year kind of projects. Uh, One of them was this big long form uh, piece of online content, uh, and it's about 5,000 words. And I did it basically on the transgender community and the
Mm,
gender critical movement and the
mm,
kind of clashes between those two groups. Um, and that went quite well because I got most of it done before the whole coronavirus stuff sort of came
mm-hmm.
up. Um, but I also needed to get multimedia content for it, so like pictures, video,
Right.
and I was going to get that at Trans Pride, which was on the first
Mm-hmm.
week of April, and obviously everything was just getting cancelled around that exact week. So I ended up having to like kind of minimize what my original kind of vision for that project. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, I also there was also this photojournalism project I was doing, and I was going to do it on the Roma Gypsy traveller community,
oh
and
wow.
that also kind of fell through because it would be a bit weird to ask them like, "Hey, can I come like to your sites in the middle of a global pandemic?" I don't think they
Yeah.
would really appreciate that. Um,
No, yeah.
but I mean, it's I've handled it kind of relatively well, I think, and our course, like I said, is quite supportive. So they're kind of going to mark stuff based on taking into account everything that we've been going through.
Right. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. But yeah, what this project that sounds really interesting. What inspired you to go? What made you choose it, or what are the things that led you towards it?
So uh, you live in Britain, don't you, at the moment?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen kind of the whole discourse around trans
Mm,
issues. Um, this was We're in a similar place to where the United States was around 5-10 years ago in terms of discourse around trans people,
mm,
because there's still a gender critical movement in the US, but it's diminished so much compared to what it used to be over there. While in England, we're kind of only just seeing it start to rise up, and
mm-hmm.
I think in Britain we're seeing it even worse because the left in Britain is very much split on this kind of issue, whereas in the United States, the largest left wing, I say left wing in quote marks because the Democratic Party isn't really left wing when you compare it to
Mm,
the rest of the world's politics, but that the whole of the left, pretty much in America, including the Democrats, they're all united on supporting trans rights, and supporting and opposing gender critical thought, which is often something that's uh, talked about on the right, like the Republican Party, etc. Um, Whereas in England, there's a huge split in the Labour Party at the moment, which where the people who are more to the left, but even some of those, like a lot of feminist socialists, are kind of against trans rights and for this gender critical movement. But it's very much split because one side is saying, "Oh, we're left wing feminists, but that means we need to defend women's rights and trans rights are oppose that," whereas other generally younger left wing activists are saying, "No, trans rights don't impede on women's rights," and the latter is where like my views kind of tend towards. But for the project, um, what I was doing, what I wanted to do was kind of look at the discs from relatively impartial view, which really done much in the media around this. A lot of the time, the papers will be looking from the point of view just of the gender critical movement or just from the trans rights movement, and I thought that what needed to kind of come into view was how both these groups, what their arguments are, and how they can kind of compromise potentially if there is any chance of compromise. And so I spoke to trans activists, I spoke to trans people, I spoke to gender critical activists, or TERFs, as a lot of people call them, but they don't like to be called that. And I created this kind of impartial. I say that again with quote marks because I think it's hard to be completely impartial when your own views are leaning towards one of the groups. With mine, I'm leaning towards, or I'm not leaning towards, I'm fully on the side of trans rights and against the gender critical movement. But I still tried to kind of, because we're marked on being impartial and balanced, so I tried to be kind of taking into account the other side's views, and hopefully I get good marks for it. I don't know, I'll see in a few days, I think.
Okay, yeah, no, exciting. What you mentioned the word TERF. What would that describe to for those who might not be fully aware?
So TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, and it basically describes gender critical feminists, people who are exclusionary of bringing trans women, particularly, into the discourse around feminism. And gender critical feminists don't like the term, and they say it's a slur, and they say it's used to kind of shut down women who are just trying to fight for women's rights. I won't get into like my thoughts on that because that will go on for like 20 minutes, and I'm sure you've got things to do. But
well, I'm here for you, man. Any detail that you want to go into, I'm happy to listen.
I'll try and keep it brief, because I do tend to ramble on a bit, I think. But yeah, it's they don't like the term because they see it as a slur, which it isn't. It doesn't really fit any of the criteria for being a slur. But they like to say it is because
there's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, I think, of just terms that people use, and then those who get called those terms immediately consider that a slur. We've seen it like a couple of times now. It's sort of a weird tactic to use, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, because essentially what it does is it divert the person's argument, which are obviously valid arguments from my point of view, and what they zoom in on is the use of a certain word, and they're like, oh, you use this word, that automatically makes all your arguments invalid. I don't know if you've seen the whole thing about Karen being a slur as well.
Yeah, and Karen, and then before that there was Boomer.
Boomer. Boomer is equivalent to the N-word, I saw one tweet.
Yeah, which is, the old statement, if one word you cannot absolutely say and then the other one is immediately compared to it, like obviously one of them is going to be worse than the other. But yeah, as you said, it's completely it diverts, as you said, it diverts the focus, and it victimizes the people that other people are trying to make a point against. So it ends up being this silly standoff and creating more conflict than sometimes there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, sorry for cutting you off there. Go ahead.
Oh no, I think I finished what I was saying, to be fair.
No, that's so. You mentioned also like this main divide is between older activists, or I guess would that be fair to say like first wave feminism compared to the more modern approach that feminism has? Is that accurate?
So yeah, kind of roughly accurate. First wave feminism is a long time before
Mm-hmm.
the kind of feminism that gender critical activists come from. So first wave feminism would be kind of describing the suffragette movement,
Right.
very
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
feminists within like the uh, votes for women kind of movement. Um, what where gender critical activists kind of come from um, is this 70s radical feminism movement, second wave feminism, I suppose you could call it. Um, and the way I see it, I think, because they were radical feminists from like the 70s, they were very much the feminists uh, who kind of overtook the whole discourse around feminism. They were the people whose voices you heard from kind of the most. People like Germaine Greer, who's very famous for her kind of feminist thought, who's now being criticised as a gender critical feminist. And what I think has happened is over the decades after radical feminism kind of phased out, the reason it's become less popular is because the discourse has kind of evolved into intersectional feminism, which is feminism which includes black women, it includes women of color in general, and tries to kind of elevate their concerns over the concerns of white women who have been the focus of the feminist movement for hundreds of years. Well, not hundreds of years. The feminist movement is quite young, but for a long time, for most of the feminist movement. And
Mm-hmm.
intersectional feminism is feminism that includes all women, and trans women are included in that. And I think part of the issue, this is what one of the trans activists who was talking to me for the project kind of was discussing, was how they kind of feel radical feminists kind of feel like they've now been ignored and pushed to the side, and they don't like that, and they want to kind of come back into the public discourse and become relevant again. And the way they've chosen to do that is by punching down and focusing on a group that's even more marginalized by them, and trying to switch up the discourse and basically saying, oh, they're not more marginalized than us. They're actually just men. They're just men trying to abuse them, which obviously isn't true. They're, trans women are a group which are very marginalized. I've forgotten the exact statistic, but they're highly at risk of sexual assault, of abuse,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
abuse. And ultimately, what they're doing is they're putting those kind of women in danger. Um, and yeah, that's why I think they're kind of trying to. That's how they're trying to come back into relevance, by punching down, by choosing a marginalized group, and trying to basically come back into relevance through that.
What do they gain from sort of being in this relevance area? What is, I mean, one of the main goals of possibly getting into a high relevancy stage, and are they directly competing with transgender rights movements, or is it really just them sort of coming out of nowhere and using this scapegoat?
Yeah, I think I don't know their motives kind of behind doing this, but I suppose everyone wants to be relevant. Everyone wants
Mm,
to be in the public eye, and when you've been in the public eye, when you've been such a huge voice um, in such an important movement for so long, then I think the feeling of neglect they maybe feel um, is just why they kind of, maybe that's their motive behind trying to become relevant, because they want to be in the public eye.
of
Um,
course, yeah.
but also because I think a lot of it's not just that. I don't think it's completely a whole, oh, look at me, I want to be famous, I want everyone to look at me kind of thing. But I think a lot of women within that movement who support it um, have very much been like, they do believe in what they're saying. I don't think they're like just making this shit up to kind of get famous and get likes and get
Mm-hmm.
like get subscribers, shit like that.
Mm.
I think they're I think they believe in what they're saying, and that's brainwashing other people into believing what they're saying. And ultimately, I think that becomes harmful to trans people, particularly trans
Yeah.
women.
Yeah. One thing I think, well, we've seen. I haven't seen any recent elements of this, but I think a big discussion about transgenders, and which isn't always very relevant, but I think it's the one that always comes up in arguments against transgender rights, is transgender in sport events.
Mm.
Did your sort of project lean into that at any point?
So I wanted to discuss this a little bit, but it was
Mm.
really hard finding sources for this kind of thing. Like I reached
Mm-hmm.
out to a couple of trans athletes as well as some athletes who have spoken out um, against trans people in women's sport. Um, I think this is a really difficult one because I'm not really an expert on the science. I've never been good at science, to be honest. Um, that's why I went into journalism because I'm better with words. But the Olympic Committee, the current regulations,
Mm.
because there's this kind of narrative that likes to push that oh, there's no regulations, like men could just say they're a woman and just immediately be able to compete in a women's team, and that's not true. There are medical checks, like they check the amount of testosterone levels in a trans woman's body before they're allowed to compete, um,
Mm-hmm.
and whether the levels need to be reduced. I don't know. Again, I don't really know the science, but I think it's kind of they use it as this argument because it's hard to argue against where you just look at it from the surface level, like because if you just say, oh, people who are men are allowed to compete in women's sports, like surely that's unfair. Surely you have to agree with that. But it's a lot more complex than that, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish I did get to look into this more actually with my project, but I could, like I said, I couldn't really get the sources, and so that's one area I'm not really an expert on. I would like to
Mm.
learn a bit more about that. To be fair,
It's yeah, no, it's a tricky subject, I think. Well, this whole thing it's incredibly complicated, and I think especially when it comes to athletes in general, we're already looking at a very, especially in like professional athlete sports, people underestimate, I think, how skilled and how above the like normal stratosphere of the everyday person that these people are, and then having that added to the fact that you're transgender or etc. That's just very difficult to understand from an outsider's point of view. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
it's
one
interesting.
of the people I tried to reach out for an interview, her name is Rachel McKinnon, and
Mm.
she's a transgender, and she came under a storm because she won. I think it was the World Championship of cycling, women's cycling or
Mm.
something. Um, and people were kind of saying, "Oh, but she's a man. She's like she has a natural advantage over these women." Um, and the woman who came second place kind of cooked up a storm over
Mm.
how unfair it was. But then when you look at like the competitions that Rachel McKinnon and that woman have been in before, there's been plenty of times where she's actually beaten Rachel McKinnon, and Rachel McKinnon has come like far down, not even close to
Right.
first. And it
Yeah.
just kind of shows that it is about skill and training, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not just because uh, she has a male musculature or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, like sport is definitely there's an obvious physical advantage that you do get, but there's so much skill and as you said, experience that goes into it. It's difficult to just judge on gender and
Mm.
yeah, you know. But yeah, your project sounds very complex and very interesting. So I did a little bit of snooping and I looked at your blog posts and only read that last article there. But it would be interesting to find out more. And good luck with the grading and everything.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll be happy to send it to you if you're interested in reading it.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So just going back to journalism, what are your future ambitions for it?
So at the moment, it's hard to say because I'm staying in Leeds, but there's at the moment there's just no opportunities in journalism um,
Right.
anywhere in Leeds. Like I've been looking for the past 2 weeks, so I'll probably end up just getting a job like I don't know, I'll at a supermarket or something, or just trying to find like a copywriting job. Um, but I'd like to work at a regional paper. There's a really good one in Leeds, um,
Mm,
which I applied for back in April, but they're not recruiting obviously because they
hmm.
posted it before the coronavirus
Right.
outbreak sort of came along, and then they kind of pulled it because they couldn't afford to hire anyone.
Hmm.
And to be honest, they'll probably have to lay people off because I sort of think
Yeah.
that journalism is becoming like a dying industry with coronavirus.
Hmm.
Um, so it's not looking great, but I'm hoping, um, yeah, regional journalism I want to get into, just kind of
Hmm.
like build up my portfolio and my skill. I'd like to write for nationals and stuff, um,
Hmm.
but the issue is like a lot of them are centered around London, and I absolutely hate London. It's it's potentially my least favorite city
Mm,
in the
hmm.
whole of England. It's just so busy and like everyone's a dickhead there, and it's
Yeah.
just like compared to Leeds, which is a northern town in Yorkshire,
Hmm.
like everyone's so friendly there. It's such a nice city. It's like big, but you can just walk kind of wherever you want.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I just hate the idea of moving to London or anything like that. Um, so
It's
yeah,
crazy when I meet a lot of people and they go, "Oh, I would love to live in London," or like, "Oh, I'd love to visit London." It's just I've never had that experience of wanting to be in London, so
yeah,
yeah, it's a bit confusing. But yeah, no, Leeds sounds like a beautiful place. I've never actually been.
it's actually I think it's the fourth biggest city in
Wow.
England.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of it's kind of like spread out from the city centre. But
Right.
the city itself, like all the housing, all the shops and everything like that, all the offices, are kind of in this confined area, which
Oh,
means
okay.
it's a huge city, but it feels like you're just kind of in like a town where you can just walk
Yeah.
anywhere and it takes 20 minutes.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
I think people have a romanticized view of
Mm,
London, particularly
yeah.
Americans, I think.
Oh, yeah,
And they're
definitely.
like, "Oh, London's like so amazing," but yeah, you do not live there. That's my one advice for
No.
any American trying to move to
Yeah.
England.
Definitely. I've only been to London for in the last I think year. I've only been there 3 times, and it was in the heat of summer. It was absolutely horrible.
Yeah,
Just the air was so thick, especially trying to. I had to use the underground to get to somewhere, and it was the worst experience ever.
oh, the
But
underground is
yeah,
awful.
it is
No one has
terrible.
any sense of like space or
No.
personal
Yeah.
like. Oh, don't even get me started on the underground.
But yeah, no. Did you find it at any point intimidating? Like seeing, it's my experience at least that most traditional forms of journalism have been under attack by various points, either by fake news or either by online personalities. Did you ever feel intimidated from going into this profession by that?
um, I've never been in like personally intimidated,
Mm, mm-hmm,
um, but I do think it is a huge. I mean, actually, I was in an Uber like a few months ago, and I was
mm.
just like chatting with the driver, and he was like, "Oh, so what do you study?" And I said journalism, and he was like, "Oh, so you're training to be a professional liar?" And I was like, "Cool. I'm glad. People have a great view of my career." Um,
Mm,
but
mm-hmm.
uh, but no, yeah, I'm concerned about the whole fake news kind of thing because I think the public's trust in journalism is at an all time low.
Mm,
Um, I mean, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people still trusted the media. Like the media could say something, and it would be the absolute end of a politician. Um, there's the biggest example I think of this in the last decade is Ed Miliband, who was the former Labour leader. and he was basically just like having lunch. He had a bacon sandwich, and a photographer took a picture of him while he was eating this bacon sandwich, and he just looked a bit funny while he was eating it, and that got plastered on the front pages with headlines like "How can Ed be British if he eats a sandwich like this?" And that just completely destroyed his whole campaign.
Wow.
And he got crushed in the general election just over eating a sandwich. But now you look at someone like Boris Johnson. He's called he's compared Muslim women to letterboxes. He's compared black children to pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. Like the amount of racist, he's called gay men bum boys. Like the amount of racist, homophobic, Islamophobic garbage he spouted, that's been put in the front pages, that's been put on the newspapers, and it's just completely not affected him at all. And I think that's because people, a lot of people now view the press as liars who are just trying to further their own agenda. And Donald Trump's definitely kind of helped with that. His constant attacks on the press have really, I think, done damage. Because I mean, he's kind of portrayed as a hapless idiot, but he has done possibly irreparable damage. I can never say that word to the reputation of the media, and that's kind of translated over into the UK as well.
And I've seen just so often it's used as the perfect explanation to get out of any factual evidence. Oh, that's just completely fake. And I think from that it's sort of spreading in other areas as well. I'm not sure if one came before the other, but along with fake news then came fake science, and then came just more and more things which are apparently false. And at this point, we're seeing all these conspiracy theories pop up and gaining large tractions of followers. So it's just interesting.
I mean, again, conspiracy theories have been around hundreds of years, but I mean, probably the one that's had kind of the biggest effect and is still kind of used today is the Elders of Zion, which is this leaflet that was created basically talking about how there's this Jewish council who plan to take over the world, and that was like really widely circulated around the whole world. It originated in Russia, I think, and and that basically created this or not created, but it exasperated this culture of hostility around Jewish people. And this idea of the Jews controlling the world is still a conspiracy theory that's sort of pushed out today. I don't know if you've seen all the stuff around George Soros. So he's like an American investor. He's Jewish. He's a donor for the Democratic Party. But if you see that if absolutely anything goes wrong in America that happens to look badly on Donald Trump, you'll get right-wing pundits like Candace Owens and other shit for brains pundits saying, George Soros must have funded this, stuff like that. And it's a dog whistle for anti-Semitism, basically. And all this kind of stuff goes back hundreds of years. And I think the internet has made conspiracy theories more legitimate, because people can now point to absolutely anything and say, "Oh, look, there's evidence for this and this," and it goes with the whole QA anon thing, that 4chan account that kind of spreads conspiracy theories, because they'll say something and then they don't even have to do the work for that conspiracy theory. All these right-wing lunatics will basically look at this and they'll and they'll create the story themselves, and they'll create this conspiracy theory around what one person has said is true, and I mean it's caused like really huge effects on real people's lives. The whole Pizzagate thing, which was 2013, I think, or 2012. Like someone could have died when someone, because they said that this pizza shop was a front for a democratic paedophilia ring, and someone went in and shot a gun in there thinking that they were all paedophiles, and like that could have actually killed like an innocent person, and and whether that kind of thing would have been spread as widely if it were 50 years ago before the invention of the internet, I don't think it would have done. It would have been something that would have been kept in like a tiny little circle between a few people, because that's how those kind of conspiracy theories used to be passed around. They just have like a leaflet, and maybe they'd post it to a friend who would then spread it to other friends, and it would still be circulated, but it wouldn't be as widely as it can be now, which can reach millions, if not billions, of people.
You're not intimidated by any of this. You're ready to take it on.
Yeah, I mean, if someone like, yeah, I'm not intimidated by people who might dislike the press, because ultimately I think I've never been in a situation when I'm actually interviewing someone where I felt like I'm being attacked or I'm being like targeted, or someone like is just trying to like catch me out or something, or is attacking me. I've never felt like that. The only time I'm ever kind of like nervous about doing interviews is when I'm doing vox pops, which are when you go on the street and you have to like stop random people, and that's not necessarily because that's not necessarily because I think that people don't like journalists and are going to attack me. It's more just because having to stop like random people who might be going somewhere, I don't want to disturb them.
Of course.
Like I've been told to fuck off before while I've been trying to do vox pops, and it's just that's the only time I hate interviewing people and feel intimidated. But in terms of the wider kind of culture around how people view journalists, it's never really been something that's put me off being a journalist or or intimidated me in any way.
I wanted to ask you, what were you doing on and before Roblox? Do you remember that sort of period?
Oh God, I must have been like 10 when I joined, because I remember how I got on it. My friend, or someone I used to be friends with, played it and just like introduced it to me, and we had a joint account on it called Oogly Booglies with a Z on the end.
Nice.
I can't believe I still remember the name of that. And we both just played on it on that. And then I liked it so much that I created my own account. And I was a big fan of 2.5 Men at the time, which I've tried to watch recently and is god awful.
Yeah.
Like it's literally the worst thing ever put to TV, potentially. And there's a character on 2.5 Men called Rose, and she was my favourite character on that show. So I created this account called Rose 6666, just because Rose wasn't available. I don't know why the 6666 came about. I just started playing on that, and later on I found the forums, and I guess I wouldn't have known it was called this at the time because I was like 12, but I was probably what you would call a troll, like on Roblox. I pretended to be a girl and just like would troll people, and
Right.
when I found the forums, that's when my account got a bit more serious because I was like, oh, there's people like discussing actual shit in here. And people just assumed I was a girl, probably because my name was Rose and I had that like pink hair on me. and I just like never corrected them, and then it
Hmm.
kind of got into a whole thing where people thought I was a girl, and I was like, okay, I've it's too deep into it now. I can't really say I'm not. And I don't know what my first post on MTVB was, but it's really weird saying all these kind of names in
Yeah,
person
yeah.
when like
They, yeah,
I don't think they've ever come out of my mouth before. Like I've written them
definitely.
hundreds of times, um, but yeah, and then I found that community. Everyone
Hmm.
again assumed I was a girl, and I never corrected
Mm.
them. And that was my very kind of edgy teenage
Hmm.
phase, where because I was online quite a bit. I don't know because I wasn't like online because I didn't have friends.
Mm.
Like I had friends, but I also had this kind of like uh, life behind closed doors where I was online and I was on a lot of different forums. I was on like debate forums as well. Um, I like lurked on 4chan as well. Um,
Mm.
and I was quite like right wing and misogynistic, and a bit
Really?
racist. Yeah,
Okay.
and if you go back on like if you go all the way back to my posts, if you you probably wouldn't even be able to find them now on that archive thing. Like
Yeah, no.
I was probably posting stuff that wasn't um, particularly politically correct,
Mm.
um, and that kind of formed that kind of early personality. But then I grew out of that when I was like 15, 16, and I started to become more left wing and more sensible.
Mm.
And now I'm me. I'm like a full blown socialist. So
Yeah.
that that was a big glow up. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
MTV was
that's
great. The
yeah.
prime when MTV was in its prime, that was
Oh, definitely.
really good time because everyone was really supportive and like friendly with each other. And compared to like the other big community that I was part of on Roblox, which was like after the Flash, the like role playing
Mm.
group, which was like uh, loads of edgy teens basically, and they were all extremely misogynistic, and obviously
Nice.
being being a girl,
Hmm.
um, I was very much targeted on that. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, so MTV was a very different change of pace to the other people I was interacting with on that site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I honestly don't remember if you ever did the big reveal where you weren't actually a girl on MTVB, but did your anyone's attitude change towards you, or did you see any significant change on MTVB because of your gender?
So I didn't come out. I was about to say like it's like I'm coming out of the closet.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't do that kind of. No, I did do that. Sorry, I did it on like the new forum that we made on Pro Boards,
All right.
and I was
Yeah.
like, I didn't make a big deal of it. I was like, oh, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
guys, I'm actually a guy. Um, in terms of people's uh, attitude kind of changing, it did. Yeah, I did notice it a bit.
Mm.
It was kind of a bit less kind of friendly,
Right.
um, a bit more hostile. Um, not in a way that kind of ever really got to me, but it was just kind of like, oh, um,
Yeah.
I understand why because you thought I've been like misleading you all this time.
Mm-hmm.
A trap, I believe they're called. Um, but yeah, I did notice that kind of change in attitude a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I never changed my personality when I was Rose. It was all
Yeah.
very much me, just like with pink hair and a crop top.
Definitely, yeah. I remember, again, this was during a period of, I don't know if you'd say high tension, but I guess a lot of people just got into arguments quickly. Was that sort of, I don't know, were you looking for that? Was that like your troll personality sort of edging into your, I don't know, Rose or something?
Uh, I guess kind of. I do kind of like to stir the pot a bit, or I did. I don't do
Mm-hmm.
it as much anymore. Um, I think what's like most interesting is that like my arguments always tended to be with freaking magic and Hilo or Hilo.
Really?
Yeah. Um,
Oh, with
whereas
them, yeah.
whereas now, um, like pretty much we agree on everything political. But back then, that was
Mm,
back during my like right wing phase where I
right.
was a bit sexist, and
That's
that probably
yeah.
changed my kind of way of interacting with them.
That's really interesting because I regularly, I mean, to do these things and for several other projects, I regularly take a couple of dives into the archives, and I've never seen you argue with, or maybe just once or twice with Hilo and Freaking Magic.
Yeah,
I said that username badly, but anyway, Ember.
it's weird.
um,
It's weird saying the names, isn't it?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
out loud.
Ugh, it is weird. It feels like I shouldn't be saying them.
It feels dirty in some way.
It
It's like
does.
they're forbidden words,
Yeah, yeah. Only to be whispered or something.
like Voldemort.
No. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do remember you having a lot of arguments with Leslie or Jake
Yeah,
right now. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, which again, I mean, looking back on them, it's just fun to read. Well, not all of them, but most of them are pretty entertaining.
yeah.
Um,
No, admittedly, I did like to stir the pot with Leslie.
mm,
Um,
hmm
not because I disliked him, just because he was quite easy to wind up. I was a bit of a dickhead when I was a teenager, so
mm. I
that
think
just
I think
made
we
it.
all were a bunch of
Yeah,
dickheads at some point.
but yeah, I probably
Yeah.
should have been a bit nicer. Um,
Ah, well, you know, that wouldn't have made us who we are today.
no, true.
With the sort of people that you met on Roblox and in the internet, and you said you had this sort of at the beginning sort of misogynistic views, which then turned completely the other way. Do you think that's a common thing on the internet? Do you think it's sort of a default attitude of being very right wing?
Yeah, I think um, the internet is very much a breeding ground for right wing views. I think,
Mm.
depending on what platform you're using, obviously. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I sometimes say that YouTube is like the YouTube comment section is like kindergarten 4chan, um,
Yeah.
because that is where for if you look at YouTube comments, they're fucking awful. Like
Mm-hmm.
they are some of the biggest cesspits of uh, awful views that you'll find. And I think when you're on the internet all of the time, YouTube comments you're constantly looking at because they're always there. And if you're
Yeah.
looking at stuff like let's plays, like gaming videos or stuff like that, um, then the comments guaranteed they're probably going to be filled with garbage like that. Because the gaming community kind of has a problem with that, I think. Um, and then also because of the YouTube algorithm,
Mm.
you'll then get recommended stuff like Ben Shapiro destroys blue-haired feminist, stuff
Yeah.
like that, and you end up clicking on that and kind of watching that stuff and thinking, oh, this guy Ben Shapiro, he's awesome, because you're seeing this one-sided view of him like doing his like really fast-paced talking, where he's like, so say that I'm actually a man and you are a feminist, and like, and he like speaks at about 20 miles per hour, and
Yeah.
there's just this feminist standing there like looking really confused, and
Mm-hmm.
he's like he like drops the mic and he's like, yeah, truth bombed. And if you're watching that and you're not watching anything else like that's kind of debunking that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then it's going to be really easy, especially for a younger person, to be radicalized like that. And
Definitely.
then obviously that eventually progresses into you seeking out other um, communities with similar views. So you seek out 4chan, and then if you get really involved with that, maybe you'll seek out 8chan, which is doesn't exist anymore,
Mm.
but did for quite a few years. Um, and yeah, for that reason, I think, and even on Roblox, like people on there, um, on the forums on there, on some of those forums, particularly like off-topic stuff like that, um, there were some proper awful racist kind of views on there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's very children are impressionable, and that sort of stuff. If they're on the internet looking at that kind of stuff, then it is going to be easy for them to be radicalized and brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
and that's ultimately what happened to me, but thankfully to a lesser extent.
Hmm. It is also interesting because the internet right now, I think, has replaced a lot of people. Like, as you said, when you were little, you had friends in real life that you'd see at school, and then you'd play around and etc. And you would explore the world with them. You'd learn about things through them. But I think
Yeah,
the internet's not fully replaced it, but has at least substituted it for a large amount. So now kids are essentially, what they're doing is they're playing in things which are much bigger than just other people's neighborhoods, etc. They're going to lands that other people before them have never had the opportunity to have. So it's interesting seeing that sort of development in what young children are exposed to.
yeah, because I think with when it comes to like the internet, the majority of children will have friends, and when they're on the internet, um, their use of the internet is largely going to be involving speaking to their friends, like on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
or other messaging apps. Um, and I think what helps with radicalization in terms of writing views like that um, is that a lot of those people don't have friends in real life. They're
Mm.
outcasts and they feel excluded um, from groups of people, and they look to those communities like on YouTube comment sections, 4chan, etc. Um, and uh, they see kind of people who are welcoming them for their own qualities, um, which they can, because it's behind a screen, it's anonymous, and you're welcoming them for their personality, and that's what they feel they're being excluded for. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and thankfully, because I had a strong friend group when I was a teenager, it meant that whilst I was interacting with that kind of stuff online, I was also, for the majority of my time, like in the day, um, sometimes when I got home on like Facebook and stuff, I was still interacting with like my friendship group, um, and I think friends really, like real life friends, really kind of help you see the real world, because there's a lot more
Mm.
diversity of views and a lot more diversity in terms of um, people of color, of ethnicity, of nationality, and it helps you kind of get away from uh, a lot of what is posted online.
Definitely, yeah, yeah. Do you remember then?
Oh yeah, yeah. I feel bad for him now looking back because we weren't
Mm.
particularly nice to him.
Because as you said, all these things they like tick a few boxes when thinking back to Van, and but it's also it's tough because once I think, as you said, these people. I don't know much about Vancouver in real life, and I'm not using this as a sort of um, throwing dirt on him or anything. But I do think he was very much involved in these alt right, well, definitely heavily right winged groups and this sort of alternate culture, which sometimes even didn't wasn't very friendly to him. So yeah, it just reminded me of that. I was wondering, he left recently, but yeah, it's I think it is an example of how many different aspects the internet does have, and as you said, how someone can be very quickly marginalized into being associated with these radicalized groups.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Ven was he. I do think he was involved in those kind of communities, like you said, because he did
Mm,
sometimes. Um, I remember he would sometimes disappear for a bit, and then he'd come back and
yeah.
make like a thread about like a specific topic or something, which was quite right wing, and
Hmm.
it'd be like, oh, okay, like you've never mentioned this before. Where did you get that from?
Yeah.
And I do think he was kind of whether it was 4chan or some other thing, I don't know, but I do think he was kind of involved in that kind of stuff.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, I do feel bad for Ven because we weren't, in general, the nicest to him, especially not me. I was
Mm,
never kind of particularly warm to him. And I'm not sure what his kind of like social life in real life was. I don't know if he was isolated or whether he had a strong friendship group but yeah, I think I do feel bad for him in terms of how we treated him, as well as how, like you said, the groups that he might have been involved with might have treated him as well, in terms of the whole kind of dragon kin kind of thing, because that is very antithetical to some of the views that are on 4chan and other forums like that.
I do feel bad for him, but I do think that, you know, a lot of people did what they could, and I don't think MTVB is a very harsh community. And
oh no, absolutely not.
Yeah. So even if he came back, I bet like people would be willing to listen to him. Not obviously believe him if he came back with new views on newfound topics that aren't exactly politically correct. But I'm sure that he would be heard out at least.
Yeah, I'd certainly be a bit more kind of patient and nicer to him than I have been in the past. Which again, I feel bad about, because I don't think anyone should be treated like that, even if they do have those kind of views and are kind of a bit different from everyone else.
Yeah. Do you, before we leave, do you have anything to say to the rest of the forum?
Remember to like and subscribe. And yeah, hit the bell.
Hit the bell,
leave a comment below. That's all I've got to say, really. Yeah, and I hope you will like my voice, because I don't think anyone has heard my voice before. I hope I get some compliments in regards to how smooth and British my voice sounds. If anyone says I sound like Daniel Radcliffe, though, I will kick off, because I've had enough of being called Harry Potter. When I was like 6 or 7, I was like jumping on my bed, and I fell off it and hit my forehead on the floor.
Really?
And I had like a little it wasn't a scar because it's gone now. It was not permanent, but it was like a little cut on my head that looks like Harry Potter's scar. And I got teased getting called Harry Potter for weeks. So
nice.
It does give me a bit of traumatic stress being called Harry Potter.
Wow. Well.
Also, JK Rowling is a TERF, so I don't really like the implication.
What's JK Rowling up to right now? Probably like her castle,
tweeting that she hates trans people on Twitter. Yeah. She's making another Harry Potter character gay.
Yeah.
She's like, actually, Severus Snape likes getting pegged.
What was the last one that came out? There was one that was just like, this can't be serious. It was like, what, that, like, wizards don't have toilets, something like that?
Yeah, no, that was my favourite one. That Pottermore tweeted, in the 19th century, wizards didn't use toilets and just vanished their waste with magic. Like, how far behind like the rest of the world were wizards that they didn't have toilets in the 19th century?
And where did all the waste vanish to? Is there just
I don't know. That's the thing. Surely they don't have like a pocket dimension that they like. I don't know. It makes my brain fry. I can't think about it too much.